If metallic dragons are paragons of genetic consistency, breeding true to their kind, and chromatic dragons can produce wildly unpredictable, potentially mutated offspring when mating outside their specific colour, why don't we see more bizarre dragon hybrids cluttering up the fantasy landscapes? The answer lies in a combination of draconic biology, behaviour, and the practices and practicalities of survival in a hostile world. Strap in, folks, and grab yourself a tasty beverage. It's Dragon Week, and it's time to get deeply nerdy. Understanding why these weird dragon mutants are uncommon requires looking at both sides of the draconic family tree and the fundamental rules governing their reproduction. Metallic dragons, gold, silver, bronze, brass, copper, are generally depicted as lawful or good-aligned creatures. Their societies often involve cooperation, and they tend towards stable family structures by dragon standards. Lore consistently portrays them as breeding true. A gold dragon mating with another gold dragon produces a gold dragon offspring. They share the core traits and appearances of their parents. This reflects their nature as beings of order and inherent goodness, often linked to the platinum dragon god Bahamut. Their offspring are predictable, upholding the legacy of their kind. Chromatic dragons, the reds, blues, greens, blacks, and whites, are aligned with Tiamat and embody evil, greed, and chaos, operating differently. While they typically mate within their own colour to produce similar offspring, lore from various editions, particularly sources such as the 2nd edition Draconomicon, confirms that interbreeding between different chromatic types is possible. The premise is that these pairings can result in highly variable and unpredictable offspring. The chaotic mutant hybrids our question today refers to. These might display mixed traits, strange abilities, or appearances unlike either parent. However, this potential doesn't translate into large populations of mutants. Several powerful factors converge to keep the population of chromatic dragon hybrids extremely low, making them rare oddities rather than a common feature of D&D worlds. This is arguably the most crucial reason. While chromatic dragons can interbreed across colours, the lore consistently states that the offspring of such unions, in the vast majority of cases, are infertile. Like mules, the offspring of a horse and a donkey, these dragon hybrids cannot reproduce. Without the ability to propagate, each mutant hybrid represents a genetic dead end. They cannot establish breeding populations or pass on their unique or chaotic traits, ensuring their numbers remain minimal and scattered. Dragons, especially chromatics, are notoriously solitary, fiercely territorial, and deeply distrustful creatures. They view other dragons primarily as rivals for territory, hoard, and power. Finding a mate is often a difficult and dangerous affair, even within the same colour. Cross-colour pairings face even greater hurdles. Difficult environmental preferences, mountains versus swamps versus forests, inherent animosity, and clashing personalities make such unions statistically improbable. Mating between metallic and chromatic dragons is considered exceptionally rare due to their fundamentally opposed alignments and natures. Chromatic dragons are not typically nurturing parents. Their approach ranged from neglect to outright hostility. Black dragons might abandon eggs or young. Red dragons might see weak offspring as rivals or even food. Blue dragons are sometimes noted as slightly more involved parents, but the general trend is harsh. Though any offspring that appears significantly different, malformed, or weak, or a mutant, is unlikely to garner any favour. A pragmatic, evil, chromatic parent might see such a hybrid as a flawed specimen, a drain on resources, or a sign of weakness. Such offspring face a high probability of being destroyed, abandoned in hostile territory, or simply left to perish through neglect, severely limiting the number of mutants that survive infancy. Even if a hybrid survives hatching and parental indifference, the genetic mismatch can lead to inherent problems. Lore suggests some hybrids might be physiologically unstable, malformed, short-lived, or suffer from mental imbalances due to their mixed heritage. These inherent defects further reduce the chances of reaching adulthood or having any significant impact on the world. While widespread populations of naturally occurring chromatic mutants are absent, D&D lore does feature specific examples of dragon hybrids. However, these often reinforce the idea of rarity and frequently involve external factors beyond simple chromatic crossbreeding. The Dracomira, mentioned in settings like the Forgotten Realms, the Dracomira is the offspring of a chromatic dragon, often specified, and a chimera. Its existence is usually tied to specific events or groups like the Cult of the Dragon, suggesting unnatural origins or magical manipulation rather than natural interspecies romance. The Wyvern Drake is another Forgotten Realms example. A Wyvern Drake is described as a hybrid of a wyvern and a chromatic dragon. Sorry if you say wyvern, I say wyvern. These are often presented as monstrosities engineered by powerful magic users like the wizard Samaster, rather than products of natural breeding. Then we have half-dragons as a result of a union between a dragon and a non-dragon creature like a humanoid. While this involves hybridization, it's a different category than chromatic crossbreeding. Often this involves dragons capable of shape-changing like metallics or specific other types, though the possibility for polymorphed chromatics is sometimes debated. These hybrids have their own distinct place in the lore, separate from the idea of chromatic mutants from pure dragon pairings. Other frequently asked questions, such as can any two different chromatic dragons potentially breed? Well, yes, according to lore sources like the 2nd edition Draconomicon, interbreeding between different types of chromatic dragons, i.e. a red and a blue dragon, is possible. However, as discussed, it's considered rare due to behavioural factors, and the offspring are overwhelmingly likely to be infertile and potentially possess a mix of traits or entirely unpredictable characteristics. Just being infertile is reason alone for the parent to kill the offspring. If they're not carrying on the legacy of their sire, what good are they? What about metallic and chromatic dragon breeding? This is considered exceedingly rare in D&D lore due to the fundamental opposition in alignment and nature between two types. If such a union were to occur, the result is described as highly unpredictable and almost certainly infertile. Some sources might term such offspring abominations. The chances of such pairing happening naturally, let alone producing viable offspring, are virtually negligible. Are gem dragons potentially different in their breeding habits? The gem dragons, the amethyst, the crystal, the emerald, the sapphire, and topaz, represent a third category, often associated with psionic power and neutrality. While detailed breeding lore might vary from edition to and source, like Fizban's Treasury of Dragons is quite different, they are generally treated as distinct types that breed true within their own kind, much like metallics. The chromatic hybridization potential is primarily associated with chromatics and not gem dragons. If you ask me whether gem dragons and metallic dragons can interbreed, I don't know. Such instances are so rare that there's no lore to cover it. Could a Dungeon Master introduce more dragon mutants? Absolutely. While the official lore explains their rarity, D&D is ultimately flexible. A DM can decide whether they create unique hybrid dragon encounters, perhaps as the result of magical experiments, ancient curses, planar abnormalities, or specific chromatic pairings that defied the odds, even if the offspring remains infertile. These mutants could serve as unique monsters, tragic figures, or plot hooks, leveraging the established lore about variability while carving out a special place in their campaign world. I am a big proponent for one-shot, big boss, weird monsters that your players can't predict the outcomes of. The divine conflict is really behind the differentiation between all the different dragon breeds, and you really can't discuss the topic of the interrelationship between chromatics and metallics and gems without discussing the divine aspect. The eternal struggle between the draconic deities Tiamat, the evil queen of evil dragons, and Bahamut, the platinum dragon of justice, is a cornerstone of Dungeons & Dragons lore. While their conflict resonates across the planes, it manifests most intensely and consequently on the world of Toril, the primary setting of the Forgotten Realms. But why Toril? It wasn't a single conscious decision by the deities to designate that specific planet as their ultimate battleground. Rather, Toril became the focal point through a confluence of ancient history, divine politics, and the presence of their draconic kin. and the very nature of the world itself within the cosmic structure. See, it was forged in primal conflict. The rivalry between Tiamat and Bahamut is fundamental, representing clash between draconic evil, greed and tyranny, and good, justice and nobility. Many creation myths surround their origins, often involving the primordial dragon deity Io, also known as Asgarath. One prominent legend suggests Io was tragically split into Tiamat and Bahamut during the cataclysmic Dawn War, a universe-spanning conflict between the gods and the primordials. Toril is a crucible of that war. The original twin world, Toril, was a major theatre of the Dawn War originally. Actions attributed to Asgarath during this era, like creating the Sea of Fallen Stars via the Tearfall event, deeply scarred the world. If Tiamat and Bahamut truly emerged from Io during this conflict on or connected to Toril, their nascent struggle would be inherently tied to the specific sphere of reality from the very beginning. Then we've got Ao and his intervention. Following the immense destruction of the Dawn Ward, the overgod Ao, kind of like a lesser immortal, split the world into Abyss, largely abandoned to the primordials on the opposite side of the star, and Toril, which has been assigned to the gods. This act effectively designated Toril as the primary stage for divine activities and conflicts pertinent to this world. As deities operating within the cosmic structure, Tiamat and Bahamut's interactions concerning Toril and its inhabitants fall under Ao's purview, solidifying Toril as their defined arena that they are allowed to have this conflict in. The Dragonfall War and the setting the stage on Toril, the first great draconic conflict. Long before recorded human history on Toril, around minus 30,000 DR, so like 32,000 years ago, during the time of dragons, the conflict between the followers of Bahamut, then known as Zymor, and Tiamat erupted into open warfare across the planet. This conflict, known as the Dragonfall War, is considered a pivotal part of the Draco Holy Wars. The war reportedly began when followers of Zymor slew Nagamat, one of Tiamat's high-ranking chromatic dragon generals. Tiamat's response was characteristically brutal. She began creating horrific draconic aberrations known as the Spawn of Tiamat to unleash her upon her foes. In response, Bahamut countered by creating his own devoted followers, the first dragonborn warriors known as the Ux Bahamuti. This entire devastating conflict, involving the creation of new draconic beings and widespread battles, played out across the landscape of Toril, cementing it as the primary battleground in the minds and histories of the dragonkind. From open war, we then moved into the era of Zorventhal. While the most intense world-shattering battles eventually subsided, potentially to prevent mutual annihilation, the underlying conflict never ceased. It evolved into a complex game of intrigue, assassination, and manipulation among dragons known as Zorventhal. However, this great game was merely a continuation of the war by other means. A Cold War, if you will, with Toril remaining the board upon which it was played, punctuated by periodic flare-ups of open hostility. Tiamat and Bahamut didn't always hold sway over Toril's mortal inhabitants as they do now. Their influence grew significantly when they became entangled with mortal pantheons, particularly the ancient Untheric pantheon inspired by Mesopotamian mythology. Tiamat became a prominent, malevolent figure within the Untheric pantheon. Bahamut, observing her growing influence and tyranny, later joined that same pantheon under the alias Marduk, specifically to counteract her schemes and protect mortals from her depredations on Toril. This divine power struggle culminated dramatically in the Battle of the Gods in Unther around minus 1071 Day of Reckoning, so about 3,000 years ago. While both Marduk, Bahamut, and Tiamat were similarly slain in a cataclysmic confrontation, though gods rarely stay dead permanently in the Forgotten Realms, this event firmly rooted their opposition within Toril's historical and mythological narrative. Following the decline of Unther, these deities maintained their presence. Tiamat was considered one of the few survivors of the Untheric pantheon and holds a place among the deities of the Faerunian pantheon at large. Bahamut is also recognised, often seen as a lesser deity or sometimes serving the greater god of justice, Torm. This continued integration into the divine structures governing Toril ensures their conflict remains relevant to the world's fate. In other words, you can always pull it into being a significant factor in your campaigns, as it can flare up at any time. Perhaps the most straightforward reason for the conflict centering on Toril is a sheer concentration of their power bases there. Toril is unique in its vast population of both chromatic dragons, Tiamat's children, and metallic dragons, Bahamut's allies, and it also answers automatically the question, why are there so many dragons on Toril? How on earth is this place supposed to operate with so many dragons around all the time? It's insane. Yes, it is, kind of. But remember, dragons sleep for centuries at a time and are only active for brief periods, quite often coinciding with their rivals or their loved ones. Both deities derive power and influence directly from their worshippers and kin. Chromatic dragons, metallic dragons, various factions of Dragonborn, and numerous mortal cults dedicated to either Tiamat's avarice or Bahamut's justice are spread across Toril's continents, especially Faerun. This dense network of followers makes Toril the logical place to recruit agents, wage proxy wars, hoard resources, and exert influence over mortal affairs. Toril holds deep symbolic weight in draconic lore, often tied to the primordial essence of Io or Asgrath. Victory or defeat on Toril carries greater meaning than it might elsewhere. Furthermore, Toril houses vast repositories of draconic lore, ancient draconic strongholds, powerful magic items related to dragons, and numerous sites of power, temples, lairs, magical foci, etc. that amplify and their respected influences. Conducting their primary struggle elsewhere would disconnect them from these vital resources and the bulk of their followers, and of course, history. Cosmic rules or divine etiquette often discourage gods from engaging in direct, world-shattering combat. It's not beneficial to anybody. Instead, they wage war through avatars, champions, and mortal followers. They are the superpowers. But establishing their primary bases of mortal power on Toril, Tiamat and Bahamut can perpetuate their conflict through these proxies without necessarily violating constraints or direct divine intervention. Toril, teeming with potential agents and high stakes, becomes the perfect stage for these indirect confrontations, as seen in events like the Tyranny of Dragons campaign focused on Tiamat's attempt to manifest physically on Toril. For a deeper dive into the complex relationship, history, and motivations of these two iconic D&D figures, check out these videos on my channel. My name is AJ Pickett, your lore master for all things tabletop role-playing, and particularly D&D and the Forgotten Realms setting. Thanks for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and support if you're able to, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.